right, welcome everyone officially to the launch of the Community Organization Grant Writing Workshop. Thank you for all this energy in the chat. We do have 2 hours together, so I'm hoping we can keep that energy up and we'll have some good discussion going throughout today. So just so folks know, this is the overview of how we'll spend the next 2 hours together. We're just going to kick it off with some context for what really inspired this workshop now, and if folks had a chance to do the recommended reading, hopefully we'll get to hear some of your thoughts. It's okay if you didn't get to read it yet, it'll be on the Google site later for folks to take a look at it. We'll do a walkthrough of the workshop, what you'll expect over the 6 weeks, where you can get all of the PowerPoints, the slides, the recordings, everything, which is on our Google site. And then we'll take a 5-minute break for folks to stretch, get water, use the bathroom, do what you need to do, and then we'll jump into our content for today. So we do have a guest instructor joining us. She'll give about an hour, 15 minutes of content, and then you all will have time for questions and answers, and we'll wrap up. So if that sounds good to folks, I'll go ahead and get us started. So I just want to introduce myself really quickly. There are some people I recognize, but lots of new faces. I'm Maggie Acosta, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Collaboratory for Health Justice. For folks who don't know, we're part of the UIC School of Public Health Dean's Office. And like many of you, what we do is we focus on community engagement really all day, every day. And since we're at an institution of higher education, what we really focus on is community engagement when it comes to research, teaching, and public health practice. So we provide resources and training to folks at the university, so students, faculty, and staff, but we're also especially excited to get to work with community partners every day, so doing things like this workshop here. And I wanted folks to get a chance to see who else is in the room. So if you'll take a second to look around, you might recognize some familiar organizations. These are just some of the people in the room. I want to say we had even some new people registered this morning, so there are people who are not here. And what else is really exciting is that we have individuals in the room who are part of organizations that are not yet started. So we have dreamers in the room who are planning on starting their own work. So organizations yet to come are in the room too. Oops, give me just a second. Okay. All right, so if you're here for the 6-week grant writing workshop, which I think most of you are in the right place. Just to gather folks together for the goal of this workshop, we're really aiming to support all of you in positioning yourself to be competitive for public health grant funds. So we have people in the room who write grants all day, every day. We have people who in the room might be new to grant writing, but we're really focusing here on public health grant funds, and we'll tell you why in a second. So when you leave the 6 weeks of this workshop, hopefully you will have both the knowledge and the skills to apply for public health funds. We will be doing networking, talking, sharing lessons. So hopefully you will also have relationships with other organizations that do similar work to you. And then for us, this is an all hands on deck project. So hopefully you will have relationships with faculty and staff at the School of Public Health. So like I said a little bit earlier, for some folks, this is not your first time to the grant writing rodeo. A lot of folks in this room have done grant writing before. And the reason we're focusing on grant writing and public health right now is because we are expecting a lot of money to come to public health. So we wanted to just share this context through this beautiful graph right here that shows kind of the background of what the public health field is like when it comes to funds. So you can see that from 2002 to 2016, really public health has been disinvested in, right? And that's not because community needs in public health aren't there. That's because public health is just not funded. But what you can also see here is that funds increase during crises or emergencies or pandemics, like the current one. So what that means for us is that we're expecting more money to come into public health, right? And for it to be effective And for it to really meet community members' needs, we need community leaders at the table. So we're hoping to position you and your organizations for this public health money that we're expecting. And to give people just a little bit of sense of what the money might look like, we wanted to share the proposal even of last month from Biden's budget that he's put forth. So there's expected to be a good amount of money for COVID and pandemic preparedness, but there's expected to also be money in all sorts of public health areas. So there's going to be more money in chronic health, in community-based violence interventions, overdose prevention, environmental justice, social determinants of health, all of these things that get to the root causes of some of the needs of our community. A lot of these things are things that a lot of you might already work on. Whether or not you call it public health, there is going to be money for it. So that's why we're here together, is to focus on how we can make a competitive grant proposal in public health for you all to do the work that you're already doing. Now, with that kind of context laid, I do want to open it up for a little bit of conversation for folks who maybe did the recommended reading. I know grant work might not be the most exciting, or for some people it really is, but it's also challenging to continue to write grant applications every year. So if folks had a chance to do the recommended reading, I want to pause now and just invite people to either put in the chat or come off of mute some of what resonated with you from the reading, or if you had any aha moments. So we're not going in any particular order. We're just gonna see if folks would like to share some of their thoughts and if we can get some conversation flowing. So I'm gonna step back and see what folks thought about the reading. Okay. So Michael, I'm going to go ahead and read your comment in the chat. And Michael says, the author made it sound like accepting grants from foundations is like selling your soul to the devil. The foundation's priorities become your organization's priorities. So I'm going to try and read between the lines here, but I think Michael's questioning whether that's necessarily true, right? Like maybe there's a gray space that we could look into. And so trying to unpack what that could mean. Did other folks have reactions or aha moments? And if you didn't get the chance to read the recommended reading, that's okay too. You can share just your general own experience on what might be challenging to do some revolutionary work with grants. Okay. So Walden put in the chat, I really appreciated the reading. It touched on issues I've been thinking about for a while now. Okay. All right. And I see someone has their hands up, so I'm gonna hold space. Go ahead.
This is Deborah. What struck me were just the varied complexities, especially when the not-for-profit is a startup or, just restarting and having to deal with, more of the complexities, including, as Michael mentioned, dealing with the funders, having to set up the, just the organizational structure for, more, as they refer to, for-profit endeavors like the accounting systems, the payroll, and all of that. But also, the part of dealing with other not-for-profits in your community and the politics involved. So, once again, I'm just always struck by the complexities when we talk about anything public health related. And so that kind of stood out for me.
Mm-hmm.
I can also share more a little bit about what I was thinking. I'm Walden, by the way. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, the reading touched on a lot of things that I've been thinking about, trying to do revolutionary work in a counter-revolutionary economic system is very difficult. Yeah, it's a real catch-22, and I don't know, it presents a lot of problems. I'm not really sure if there's a solution to it or if there's a way to engage in revolutionary work in an authentic way within our current system. But it's definitely a challenge.
Mhm.
I would like to share. My name is Oran. I'm with Westside Health Authority. I'm very new to the whole grant writing process, and I'm also what you would call one of those newbies that has higher aspirations for himself. So I'm glad, I'm definitely excited about it. I think one of the things that I found, well, it was a few things that I found from the reading that was interesting, since it's all new to me, how everything was number driven from the funders, and they wanted measurables and all the rest of that. And it took them out of their own scope of work majority of the time, and they end up overextending themselves. And I wanted to know if anybody in the group that's currently involved in a situation like that would like to share their an example of that, of how they're being overextended, or how the pressures from the funders has made them have to change their scope of work.
Andrew, I think you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, because that really spoke to me. We have, we're a homeless and housing organization, but 100% of our funding goes toward people who are housed and services for them. But we've expanded our programming to work with people who are currently homeless. And because we don't have any funding for that, that often gets put on the back burner, or our staff are stretched to say, well, morally we want to do this, but financially we have to do this. And it leads to this kind of disparity in where we're kind of allocating our time and our services. So as a program director, I'm generally advocating for what we're doing with the people, but I have to almost push back on kind of our existing funding structures, or work to hopefully expand those structures.
Thank you for sharing. I think that was a great example. I see that Luce also has their hand raised. Luce, do you want to share a story or experience?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm with La Casa Norte, and then also volunteer with Increase the Peace. So we've had to take on, Increase the Peace had to take on like a fiscal agent with La Casa Norte, because we didn't have the infrastructure to just, go on grants on our own, or the financial backing. And then also having to switch what I do. So typically I would be out in the field, interacting with community members, which is what I love to do. But I've had to have more of a focus on the back end. So doing admin work, doing reporting, like focusing on what the grant details and what we have to do, making sure that the rest of the team that is on the field is following whatever the grant is requesting. So I do try to still go out in the field as much as I can, but a lot of my work has now had to be doing more admin.
I'm nodding because, yeah, I think I can relate to that. I saw a couple other folks nodding too, so I think that's relatable. I'm wondering if anyone else or a couple more people want to share some last thoughts before we move on.
Hi, this is Vicky. I just wanted to say I don't really have a lot of experience with grant writing. It usually falls on the founder to do it. but one of the things I didn't have time for the reading. I apologize, but I will do that before the next meeting. But one of the things I would like to kind of aim for is also just increasing people's salaries, if that's even possible, through grant writing. Because a lot of time it's so focused on the activities that you have to do, or at least that's what I imagine. Like, and then I know that you have to kind of follow up afterwards and say, this is what I did X, Y, and Z. So part of it is like continuing the growth of the company, but also I also feel like people should have better paying wages, because often they start, falling a little bit lower because the grant or the money has to go to a specific thing. But maybe that's just my lack of understanding of how all of that works. But that's definitely one of the things I'd like to work on, and hopefully start getting the ball rolling through this experience.
I think one of the things that I have learned through this pandemic, because we actually have a person that is helping us with grants, I acknowledge that there's a gap in the language and the understanding. And I think one of the things that I'm discovering is, and I don't know where, well, I have to analyze and where it comes from. But I think one of the things sometimes is we're trying to prove what we're doing is worth it, the investment. So the way we talk about it is different. When I read how the grant writer is writing, it's very like, very focused and clear and direct. And that's very hard for me because deep inside of me, I feel that I need to prove, like I need to convince you that what we're doing is great. So it just comes from a different place and it's just interesting for me.
Well, Maria, some of us know you already. We know that the work you're doing is great. So keep doing the work that you're doing and thank you for all that you do. Okay, I'm gonna keep us moving along. I want to say thank you to everyone for sharing your reflections. Thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to learn together from each other. I do want to acknowledge that we're all taking different things from the reading, that our experiences vary, but that we're also trying to solve some of these things together and that there doesn't seem to be a clear answer right from the get-go. So I hope that we can continue to stay engaged in conversation together. The reason we did want to share this reading on the very first day is to kind of frame this as the context of the work that we do. This is what's happening in the background. And I say we, because even though we're technically not a community-based organization, we also apply for grants. So we're sharing in some of these experiences and some of these challenges with you. And so we hope that in this workshop, we can center some of the things that typically don't get centered. So collaboration and community voices and advancing the broader movements for social change. So high ambitions, we're setting it from the get-go, but we're looking forward to doing this all of us together here in community. So with that, I want to share a little bit about what you can expect over the next 6 weeks, and then we'll take a break and we'll go into the content for today. So for those of you who don't know us, this workshop is part of some of our work that we're calling Reciprocal Technical Assistance. It is a bit academic jargony because we are part of the university, but really what it is bi-directional learning with our community partners and trying to support the needs of our community partners as they let us know what those are. So some of those things include community course alignment. So that's where we're matching community organizations like yours with a graduate public health class where students are working on projects that meet the needs of community partners. We also have something called the Health Justice Speakers Bureau, and some of the people in this room are part of the Speakers Bureau. We're always welcoming more people. And this is an initiative to bring community experts like yourselves into public health classrooms to help radicalize our students, to help teach them about the things that you're learning in the field with your own community expertise. And then we have this space. It's part of something called the Community Center Design Institute. It's really bringing together organizations, so focusing at the organization, at the movement level, and to do workshops like the one we're doing today. This workshop did come out of something that our partners asked us to do, so the future workshops will also be designed this way. So we want to hear from you all, what are the kind of workshops, what are the kind of trainings that you want to hear, so that we can design the next iterations of workshops like these. And for the 6 weeks that we'll be together, this is the content that we'll go over. It's also on the workshop overview that you can find on the Google site. Just so you know, we're going to start off today with finding grants. Next week, we're going to have a panel with different funders. Then the third week, we're going to focus on data. That's both quantitative and qualitative. So we'll look at some of the stories and the narratives that are growing power in grant writing. And then in the second half of the workshop, we're going to dive into some of the public health tools. So logic models, ongoing evaluation, and thinking about sustainability and collaboration for the long term. So these are the 6 weeks. One other important thing is that on some of these weeks, folks will get what we're calling assignments. They're really opportunities to practice what you learn in class. And you'll have the opportunity to get feedback also from people in public health. So we'll help you hone in on some of the stuff so that you can walk away from the workshop with hopefully drafts of things that you can use in grant proposals. And because we have asked folks to be at all 6 sessions or as many as they can, and to also submit assignments on top of that, we know that your time is valuable, that you all are stretched, and that you're doing all the important work every day. So we are also able to offer stipends for people who participate in the full workshop. The stipends we can offer is $200 to each participant in the workshop, and we'll send out the paperwork for getting that started in the second half of the workshop. Okay. And like I said, this is an all hands on deck opportunity for us at the School of Public Health. So you're going to have 3 different types of support people here at the School of Public Health. The first kind of folks that are going to support us here are the instructors. So these are the people who are going to give the content on a weekly basis, help foster discussion, and answer your questions. So for this week, we have Robin Sylvester Buell joining us, and then next week we'll have panelists and we'll have other guests throughout the class. The second kind of support staff you'll have is the weekly review team. So this is going to be me, my coworkers, my comrades here at the Collaboratory. We're going to be the ones reviewing the assignments that you submit and providing feedback to you. So we'll have an opportunity to work closely with you, which we're really, really excited about. If my folks are here, can you just come off camera really quickly and wave so folks can see you? They'll be getting the chance to work with all of us together here soon. All right. And then the third kind of support staff, these are going to be content experts. So these are going to be people in public health who focus on the very same topics that you all are interested. So it'll be an opportunity for you all to bring your community expertise and to work also with public health experts on the very same topics. So right now we have a handful of people signed up, but as you all start to submit assignments and flesh out some of your ideas, we'll be recruiting on more community experts that can talk to you about the topics that you'd like to focus on. Okay, and I did send out the link to the Google Sites, but I know folks are busy, so I wanted to set aside a little bit of time for us to go through the Google site really quickly. This is your one-stop shop for everything. So you'll find any readings, slides, resources here, and this is also where you can submit any assignments that you want to turn in. So I'm going to hand it over to Marjorie who's our workshop assistant, and also designed this beautiful website. So she's just going to walk us through it really quickly so folks can see it and ask any tech questions if they want to ask them. All right, Marjorie, I'm handing it over to you.
Thanks, Maggie. Can you all see my screen okay? Okay, perfect. So yes, very quickly, just wanted to show you all the course Google site, which you should have access to. If you're having any trouble with accessing, please let us know. There shouldn't be any issues, but you know, things always happen. So this is the landing page that you'll be directed to when you click on the link that we've shared with you. Just has kind of an overview of what we'll cover within the workshop, not too much information on this first page. So then when you navigate to the workshop information tab, you'll have access to an overview of the workshop, session information that includes our meeting frequency and the dates that we'll meet, as well as information about Zoom. So if you're unable to find your Zoom invite, you can always email us and we're happy to help you get into the workshop sessions, because once you register, you can re-register if you want to, but we can also maybe help you locate your link. Under course overview, we have a link to our course overview document. So it shares kind of some information about the background of the course, the methods of instruction, a session breakdown of kind of what each of the sessions will look like. And then this is kind of what you might envision a standard like course syllabus to look like. So the day, the topic, what we'll be covering, instructor, the learning objectives, and if there's any homework or assignments that we'd like you to complete. So this is all really helpful as kind of a one-stop shop document where you can find all of the information about the session. So then if you go to the weekly content tab, that's where you'll have access to a bit more information about each of the sessions. So up top, these are all links that will link you further down in the document, so you don't have to scroll all the way down once we get to the later sessions. So I'll just jump us to this first session. So this is today's session. So it has the topic, an overview of who the instructor is, the readings that we recommended, and then additionally, we'll link the class slides as well as the recording once we have those things, once the class session is over. And then we'll have information about your assignment here, as well as in the assignments tab too. So we haven't posted the assignment quite yet, but once we post it and once you're ready to submit, you can just click this link right here and it will take you to a box link where you can submit your assignment. So again, more detailed information about each session right here on the weekly content tab. So again, for assignments, we have a bit of information about the purpose of the assignment. We'll post the descriptions here, and then submitting assignments, it just reminds you that the submission links will be listed here, but also in the weekly content tab, so you can find them in either place. And then finally, we have course evaluation. So this is not evaluation of you all, it's evaluation of us and the workshop. So I just want to be clear, we're not evaluating you in the workshop. So we did ask everyone to complete the pre-evaluation before today's session. So if you were not able to do that yet, we would really appreciate if you did that when you had a moment. It's linked right here. So you can always click here and get access to that. We really would love you to complete that before we get too much further into the workshop series, so we can kind of understand your reasons for taking or for participating in the workshop before we get in too deep. And then we'll also have midpoint evaluation and a post evaluation. The midpoint evaluation will just kind of help us learn how we can improve the workshop series to better meet your needs. And then post evaluation will help us understand what you thought about the workshop as well as what you learned and took away from it. So I don't think there's anything under additional resources. We will post things here as we have additional resources to share, but additionally, if you have things that you would like to share with the larger group, you can always send those to me or Maggie or other folks who are helping coordinate the workshop, and we're happy to share them here. This could be like a hub for resource sharing, as well as things come out that you all want to share with one another. So I'll drop my email in the chat so you have access to that, but I'm always happy to answer questions as well. I saw one chat come in, so I just want to make sure it's nothing about this. Okay, good. So before I stop sharing, does anyone have any questions that I can answer about the Google site? Okay, good. Well, if things come up, feel free to let me know, but thank you all so much.
Thanks, Marjorie. And thanks for dropping your email in the chat. Please do send us any resources you want us to share with the group at large, okay? And I also want to pause now to see if folks have any general questions about what to expect over the next 6 weeks. A thumbs up if people are okay with where we are so far. Okay, awesome. Great. Well, that is it for the overview of the workshop, what to expect for the next 6 weeks. So we can pause and take a 5-minute break here. Let's come back, let's say 10:43. That's a little bit over 5 minutes, but folks can go get more coffee, tea, water, whatever it is that you need, use the bathroom, get snacks. We'll come back and then we'll jump into the content for today, okay? See folks at 10:43. Alrighty, folks, it's 10:43. Trickle back in. We're gonna get started here in a second with our guest speaker for today. I see some folks are turning their cameras back on. That's great. If your camera's off, but you're in the room, can you just give us a thumbs up or some kind of reaction so we know the majority of folks are back in the room? Okay, thank you. I'm seeing thumbs up. Thank you. Okay. Alrighty, let's get started. I'm gonna give Robin a chance to introduce herself in a second. If it's okay to spotlight her for a second, I just want to introduce her with all of her credentials and the amazing knowledge that she brings. So Robin Sylvester Buell is the Director of Research Services here at the UIC School of Public Health. She has years of research administration experience and is a certified research administrator. She works here with us in the Dean's office, where she oversees research development services and pre-award grant support for all of us. So thank you, Robin, for all of your work. I'm going to turn it over to you so you can get us started on today's content.
Thanks, Maggie. All right. So at some point, we may have to do a little coordination where I'll need to take the screen if possible to do some searches, but I'll let you know when, okay?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so as Maggie mentioned, I'm the Director of Research Services for the School of Public Health. I spend part of my time looking for grants. Usually that is to support research, but as Maggie mentioned, the Collaboratory for Health Justice, their work also spans other activities as well. I'm going to talk today about looking for grant funding kind of in a very broad sense across all types of funding sources, and we'll also get into the different types of funding sources as well. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So I think when you talk about looking for grant funding, it's important to understand the landscape of grant funding that you're looking in. Thinking to the reading about how the author felt like there was pressure from the foundations that was driving their work. If you kind of take some time to look into the funding landscape, hopefully you can avoid a little bit of that situation so that you can find a funder who is a really good match for your work so that you're not feeling like you're getting, there's always going to be some pressure, but hopefully you're not feeling like you're getting too much pressure to change the trajectory of what you want to do. So if you want to go to the next slide. So the funding landscape can vary across all of the funding sources. And I've kind of broken those down here into different types of funders. So there are federal funders, mainly federal agencies. There are other governmental funders, such as state and municipal government. There are nonprofit foundations, which I'm sure that you are all familiar, nonprofit and foundations, sorry, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And also, I kind of threw corporate giving into that bucket. A lot of the corporate giving is done through a corporate foundation. And then there are also universities and university partners. So I kind of distinguished between the two of those. So sometimes there are grant opportunities that you can apply to through the university, and sometimes you partner with the university to apply for grant opportunities. How you look for these funding opportunities will vary. So I say that you use different search tools for different funding types, and sometimes even for different sponsors that you know you're going to target. So again, that's why it's important to kind of learn the funding landscape so you know where you want to look in the first place. And the next slide. So this is a nice article here that I came across as I was putting together this presentation. And I really liked this quote here that research and grant makers shouldn't be crisis instigated or something you tackle in response to a specific need. Instead, it should be a proactive approach across the universe of grant makers. And then identify those that are the best fit for your organization's work and build relationships and ask when the time is right. And this is a 5-step process that this article lays out, which is prioritize, research, find a good fit through a deeper dive, cultivate relationships, and then make an ask. And I thought that that was a good framework, fairly simple to looking for funding. And the link is there, and we could put this in the resources tab of the Google website. So another resource that I wanted to share here before we dive too far into some of the places to look for funding is another one that I came across as I was putting together this presentation. And this is an organization called Forefront. It's Illinois Statewide Association representing both grant makers and nonprofits. They have a really nice about 50-minute video on specifically focused on looking for foundation funding and finding a good fit. I couldn't do justice to the way that they've described it. I think they did a really nice job. So if you are interested in foundation prospecting is a term that people use for that, then I would definitely recommend this video. This organization also has a lot of other resources, and I'll touch on some of those as well later in the presentation. So finding the right fit is really important as you're looking. So just keep some things in the back of your mind. As you're looking for a funder, you want a funder that's going to be a good fit with the programmatic area. So what type of work are you proposing to do? Are you looking to help with improving community mental health? Are you interested in environmental justice? So those are going to be, big picture things you want to think about, as well as maybe some more, also maybe some sub objectives keep in mind as you're looking so that you can see if you have a good fit programmatically. And then also the population served. So with the foundation sponsors, especially, they're very interested in the population that you're serving. So especially for in an academic environment, I think I've even heard a foundation say, we're not interested in your research, we're interested in the population that you are serving. So that's something that's really important to foundation sponsors. And then geographic area. So sometimes you have funders that are specific to a geographic area. So that might be a government agency, like say the city of Chicago or the state of Illinois, or you might have a foundation sponsor that is interested in funding things in a specific geographic area. So as an example, the MacArthur Foundation funds a lot of projects in Chicago and in Florida where they have ties, or there are several other smaller Chicago-based foundations. And then where do you look? So for finding the right fit. So websites are a good first step. Annual reports are usually posted on the website where you can see the types of priorities that organizations have had in previous years or the current year. And then past awards a lot of times are listed on the organization's websites, or if they're not listed there, sometimes you can do a little research and find some news outlets that will highlight some of the awards that organizations have made in the past. All right, you can go to the next slide. So as you're starting to get a lay of the landscape for the funding that you're looking for, you want to gather information about the funders that you think might be prospects for you. So this is just an example here. If you were interested in getting NIH funding through the federal government, you would want to learn a little bit about NIH. NIH is made up of 27 different institutes and centers, and each has its own specific research agenda. So that would be important to know, because then you would want to dig a little bit further and see which one of those 27 institutes or centers would be a good fit for your work. And then a foundation example below, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation invests in 4 broad areas: health systems, healthy communities, healthy children and families, and leadership for better health. So again, you would want to see if you fit into one of those 4 broad areas, and then look a little bit further into the funding opportunities that are tied to those areas. Next slide. So as you're searching, how do you know if a funder is a good fit? So some of the ways that you can dig a little further after you've kind of reviewed the information on the website that's publicly available is you can contact a program officer or another contact if there is one listed on the funding announcement or the program website. I will say also for foundations, you want to make sure that the funder is open to inquiries. For federal grants such as NIH, a lot of times that's part of the program officer's job is to field some inquiries about the funding opportunity that is out there. And then explore, so take a look at previously funded projects, and I will show you that first one there, usaspending.gov, where you can look at all of the federal funding that has been awarded in grants. Also, a lot of the federal agencies have their own databases of funded projects. And then most of the larger foundations will list their funded projects on their websites. And if you're not finding information on the websites, then sometimes, again, news articles is a good place to look. And then ask a mentor or colleague. So that's just really valuable information. That's probably some of the best information you'll get is if you can find somebody who has funding from a specific funder already that's willing to talk about their experience. That can be really helpful. And then off to this side there, just a kind of funny little cartoon, but looking for funders that offer general operating support. So that's a really tough, as we all know, a really tough find. But as you're looking through funders and some of their past funding opportunities, if that's something that you need, then you may want to do a search on general operating support and see if it's a funder that has offered that in the past. And if so, you might want to bookmark that and just keep track of it for the future to see if another opportunity comes up. All right, next slide. So this is just a reminder again that if we're thinking about the different funding sources, then we want to use different search tools for the different types of funding. Next slide. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about federal funding. So all federal funding, grant funding, is listed on grants.gov. So there's a giant database, and we'll take a closer look at that together. It lists pretty much all of the federal agencies' grant funding. It does not list contracts. So there's another website that lists contracts, but for the most part, the grant funding is where you're going to want to be. The other federal agencies also often have their own databases, which can be very useful for understanding programs that come up on a cyclical basis. So sometimes they will have a program that gets annual funding. The opportunity is not open right now, the window to apply, but it opens every year. So sometimes you can find information there so you can know what to expect. So I've listed a few of the agencies that we have experience with here that may be of interest to you and have included their websites there. And if you go to the next slide, okay, so grants.gov, like I said, is the first one that I'm going to talk about. This is going to include most of the federal agencies. There is both a simple keyword search and then some advanced features to narrow down searches. And one of the nice things about grants.gov is that you can create a profile and then you can save searches and it will email you the results of that search over time. And so that can be really useful if you know, for example, that you are looking for SAMHSA grants. You can do a search just for SAMHSA grants and have it email you every SAMHSA grant that is ever listed on the website, and you don't have to lift a finger past that point. So that's a really useful tool. So I will take control of the screen if that's okay. Okay. And Maggie, can you give me a thumbs up if you see the grants.gov webpage?
Looking good.
Okay, perfect. All right, so this is the grants.gov site. And like I said, if you sign up for a grants.gov account, then you can save searches. So you can do that using this register link here. To search for grants, you go to the search grants tab. So this site, just a side note, is also where you apply for a lot of federal grants. It depends on the agency that you're applying to. But there are also other tools on here. If you are going to apply for a federal grant, other resources that you can learn about how to do that. But we're going to talk about searching for grants today. So this is the search tool here. If you want, you can look at every open grant opportunity currently or that was recently updated. So sometimes I will do that. For example, if I want to look at every grant opportunity posted in the last week, I can change the date range here, update it, and then you can sort by all of these columns here. So a lot of times I will sort by agency, and then that way I can scroll through and see by agency what has been posted. And I'm usually interested for the School of Public Health and HHS, which is Health and Human Services. So I usually scroll down and take a look at those. So you could do something similar if you're searching on a regular basis. One of the reasons I do that is so that I won't miss out on some of the other agencies. Like say, sometimes we're interested in EPA. So I might happen to see, oh, this is an EPA announcement that's related to public health that wouldn't normally appear in my searches. So that's one really easy way to search. But if you want to take a more targeted approach, then you can use the keyword functions. So we'll put in some keywords here. I think violence intervention was one of the keywords that was mentioned earlier. I haven't done the search, so we'll see what comes up. Okay, so we got some results. And you can see that the first one here is a notice of intent to publish a funding opportunity for research on community level interventions to prevent firearm and related violence, injury, and mortality. And you can see that this is an NIH announcement based on this column here. This one is forecasted. So this is interesting. One of the things that is nice about grants.gov is sometimes agencies will post there and say, hey, we're going to put out an announcement. We haven't gotten it together yet, but we're going to put one out. But we want to give people time to prepare. So this one here is forecasted. That means it's not out there yet, but they're letting people know ahead of time. And then they're also letting us know here that the estimated post date is January of 2022. Well, we're past that already. And the estimated due date was April of 2022. So this is what this may be is a notice that hasn't expired yet, but in general, those would be dates in the future. And then you could look for the posting to come out. So I would, if I was interested in this, I would probably dig a little further and see if I could find a live announcement with this same opportunity title. So another one here is actually posted. So this is a preventing school violence posting. And then you can see here that this is due on July 6th today. If you were applying to that, better get your application in. There's usually a description of, a very brief description of what the announcement is for, some information on eligibility, and then usually somewhere there's a link to the full announcement. And if I was interested in this and it had a future date and I had an account, what I could do is subscribe to it, and then it will email me any updates to that announcement. So now I'll show you. So let's say I want to save this violence intervention search. So I can do that easily by just saving the search. Oh, it will ask me to log in and then it will save it. I won't do that right now because it's one of those two-factor authentication things. That was a fairly simple search. That was just a keyword search. I could also say narrow that down a little bit. So let's say I only want nonprofits. eligibility with 501c3 status. So it's not going to email me a bunch of stuff that is only for, say, state governments to apply to. And then if I was only interested in, say, let's get rid of the keyword. And then I'm only interested in a certain agency. So maybe I just want an email that gives me all of the Department of Housing and Urban Development grants if I'm in housing. So I can get the listings there, but then I can save the search. So anytime a new listing is added to this list, it will just email me directly, and then the link will take me to one of these pages that looks like this. Are there any questions before we move on about how to use grants.gov, or anyone who's had experiences using it that they would like to share with the group?
One thing that I want to share for folks using grants.gov is if you're sharing, if you find like a grant opportunity that you're interested in and you want to share to one of your colleagues or maybe a collaborator, is to make sure you grab the actual link for the grant, because occasionally if you're copying links, just like right-clicking, copying the links, just based on how they built out the website, you won't get an actual usable link to share an opportunity, and you'll have to retrace your steps to find opportunity again.
That's a really good tip. And the link to share is right here. So it's not obvious where it is, but this is the one that you want to use to share rather than the browser bar. All right, Maggie, if you want to pull the slides back up, we'll move along. All right, and we're at USA spending.gov. I guess we didn't need the slide for that necessarily, but so we're talking about if you want to look for what have different agencies funded, or maybe you don't know what agency you're interested in federal funding, but you don't know what agency you might want to be looking for. One thing you can do is go and search different nonprofits or other organizations like you that have been funded in your geographic area. And I will show you how to do that.
Shall I hand the screen over to you again, Robin?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so USAspending.gov should be on the screen now. Okay, perfect. All right, so they've done a nice job of making the site better over the last few years. Maggie mentioned that a lot of pandemic response funding has been coming out and will continue to come out. And there are some tools here where you can track specifically COVID-19 funding. So I'm going to show you a way to search awards for nonprofit organizations. And I will probably search just by the last fiscal year because this data set is so large. You could search by, 2 or 3. One reason that you might want to search previous fiscal years is if you're looking for something that has been funded in the past, and you want to see who received that funding and what kind of amount or other characteristics about that funding that was offered in the past, that you can kind of think about whether it's coming out in the future. This will search contracts. For our purposes today, I'm going to search grants. You can search by agency if you would like. For today, we're going to search by location. So US, and I'm going to do Illinois. And then for our recipient type, we're going to do nonprofit. And I think we're going to leave it at that and see what we get. So I'm going to submit the search. Ooh, 31,644 federal grants going to nonprofits in Illinois. And we can order these by different columns. So if we want to look at the largest ones first, we can look at it that way. And I'm going to narrow it down to Cook County and see if that makes our list a little bit more manageable. So 447 grants in Cook County. And so you can see the recipients here. You can see how much they're getting, a description of, usually it's a smaller, shorter version of the title. Was it COVID-19 funding? What was the awarding agency? And was there a sub-agency? So a lot of these are going to be HHS, Health and Human Services. And then what sub-agency was that? So this one, for example, was Health Resources and Services Administration, or these three were right here. This one was NIH. This group was Administration for Community for Children and Families. We could sort this by awarding sub-agency if we wanted to maybe take a look at a group of them there. So here's a grouping of SAMHSA. I'm going to go back over here and just kind of take a look at what are the organizations that are getting substance abuse and mental health agency funding. And then you can dig down into the record a little bit more. There's not a ton of information given, but you can see the total amount that was given to this organization. And in this case, it gives us some funding over time. You can see this bump here in 2021. That was probably pandemic related funding there. So you can definitely go down a rabbit hole on the site, taking a look at different spending and, but it's useful, I think, to get a feel for the landscape of, if you're interested in federal funding, where you might want to be looking. All right, Maggie, what is the next slide? Is it something I need to pull up on a website, or is it more text?
It looks like we're going to NIH funding.
Okay, perfect. Then I will not switch screens. We'll just go right to NIH Reporter. So this is another tool where you can search for projects that were funded. So if you are interested in projects that the National Institutes for Health might be interested in, so typically these are more like research projects. So this may be something where you are working with a community partner. But this is a good place to search. So I just put in a few terms here: community mental health. And we'll search by those. This will give me a listing of projects. You can click on a project and there will be an abstract, which is really nice. And there will be some awarding information. So the organization, so this one is a VA medical center. And then if there were any publications related to this project, there are none yet, but there would be publications here as well. So this is an interesting way. Maybe you want to see who's doing work with NIH in your area. You could do a search by geography. Another way to view these search results is by a map. So we can zoom in on the map here. And this just is telling me like kind of how much funding is in that area. And then they have some different charts, and these are usually pretty interesting. So I mentioned that there were 27 institutes and centers as part of NIH. Reporter also reports on some other HHS agencies. So you can see SAMHSA is here as well. CDC has probably got a listing in here. You can see how much funding in this area, community mental health. You can see National Institute of Mental Health is the lead funder in this area. This is just another way to view that. If we wanted to look at, say, all of the National Institute of Mental Health or SAMHSA projects, we could click on the number here and it would take us to all the projects funded by that agency. And then this tool I really like is kind of a keyword map of what kind of areas these projects are in. So you can see that 108 of them were funded in the area of health disparities. A subsection of that was funded in violence. And then we can click on that and then we get some of those projects in that area here. So that's just kind of a cool tool if you're interested in a specific health research area. Maybe you're looking for a partner, or maybe you're just interested in what kind of work is in that space. You can use this tool for that. All right, Maggie, is there another tool listed or do we have some slides now?
It looks like we're going to government funders next, state and Chicago.
Okay, perfect. So I believe that the state is the first one I have listed.
Yes.
So this is the Illinois Catalog of State Financial Assistance here. This is not as flashy of a website as the last one we were on. There is a list of agencies with active grant programs, currently funded grant programs, and then this is the list of the current funding opportunities here. And this is all of them here. This site is a little bit difficult to navigate. Sometimes you don't know exactly what you're looking at. So I'm going to take a look at asthma control and health plans. And this will tell me which Illinois agency is funding it. It's public health, the estimated total program funding, and the application date range. So this one closes on July 12th. And then this should be a PDF of the grant opportunity, which will tell us, oh, this one just is a one pager here. Sometimes it will be a whole document. So this one's telling us we need to go to the IDPH website to view the grant opportunity. And sometimes that happens. And that is probably a good segue to the IDPH website, which I wanted to share with you as well. So they have their own grant listing. So their website is called eGrams. And the place to search for grants is going to be on the left-hand side here, current grants. And then you search by the sub department of Illinois Department of Public Health. So Center for Minority Health Services is one that we'll take a look at. And then you can see all of their open announcements here. This first one is COVID homeless supports. And you can open that up. One of the things to watch out for this is to make sure that pop-ups are enabled on your browser. And then you'll have to do a little digging to get to the notice of funding opportunity. There it is. And it will come up here so we can see estimated total funding, $300,000. Awards will be $50,000 to $75,000. And then this will get into the program description. So this is where you want to be looking to see if this fits with the activities that your organization is currently working on. Right, and I'm going to move on now to City of Chicago, I think is probably the next one under government. Okay. I think we're moving down the list in my order of my least favorite websites. So I took us to this landing page because I felt like it would be helpful for everyone to see where we're going, because I always get lost here. So this is going to be the landing page that you eventually get to when you're searching for Chicago grant opportunities. Then we're going to want to go to the e-procurement bid opportunities page. And then we're going to want to keep going to bid and solicitation opportunities. And then finally, when we get to this table here. This is where the opportunities are listed. And you can't tell how many are listed here. It looks like there's only 10. If you click this little arrow, keep going, you can see that there were 21. I just always like to check and see how many were listed. And then this is one where it's kind of difficult to see what they are, but we're going to take a look at this 22nd Ward Community Workforce Development Micro Grant. So the way you do that is you want to use these tiny little sunglasses on the side, and then that will bring up the listing. There was a Zoom meeting for this on June 16th. For city grants, it's usually strongly suggested that you attend the bid meetings if you are able to. And they are not great about recording or posting those, so it's always good if you can make the meeting itself. And then the PDF here will give you the information about the opportunity. And it will also include the application and how to apply. So that's the application. I'm scrolling through really quickly so that you can get to the part, what is this? Okay, so this is a $25,000 available for a one-time grant for recipients who will engage and prepare local individuals in workforce development opportunities, providing job training and assistance for upcoming developments in the 22nd Ward. So it took me a little bit to get to, you know, where the information is about this funding opportunity. So like I said, one of the reasons that that's my least favorite website. All right, Maggie, what's next on there? Should we switch back to the slides now?
Next, we're going to non-federal grant funders.
Okay, so before we do that, does anybody have any comments about the government searches or anything that they would like to share?
We did have questions in the chat if the slides with the links can get shared later. So we assured people that we'll be sharing the slides and the links.
Okay, perfect.
I have a question. Do you have to have any like type of special skill set to apply for certain grants, if it's a HRSA grant or HHS grant or City of Chicago grant? Is there like any support for those grants? Like if you have questions or if you run into a grant that you think would be a great fit for your program or for your site, but maybe you don't have the skill set to like pull everything together. Are there any sites that offer support to do that?
That's a good question. I am not familiar with any, kind of sites or services that offer support for those type of grants. Depending on the grant itself, the agency or organization posting it may offer some technical assistance. So HRSA specifically, they do a technical assistance webinar usually at the outset of the grant. They also have some, if you go to the HRSA website and sign up for their listservs, they offer some grants webinars for free online for how to manage their grants. And then also they usually have a program officer or grants management specialist listed in their announcements who you can ask questions as you're considering applying for grants. And how responsive that person is just kind of depends on the opportunity. Sometimes they get overwhelmed and they can't get back to everyone, and sometimes they can be very helpful. So it's on a case-by-case basis. So that's just with that specific agency, one example, but some other agencies are not as helpful as that.
Thank you so much.
Miguel, did you have a question?
Yeah. So I was wondering if, I know usually it's done more so for RFPs, although I have seen it with some non-government organizations where they have essentially like a bidders conference or a conference where they bring in potential applicants. Are you starting to see more of that? And if you could just maybe share a little bit about that. And again, I know bidders conferences are mainly for RFPs, but just some of these different conferences and events that an organization may host in order to give more information and have questions answered.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, the city of Chicago usually has one of those. And you'll see where a lot of the listings I showed you, even though they said they were, they list them as bids, they're grants. So like that workforce development grant was listed under the bid opportunities, and they have that bid call. And what we found with city of Chicago is, that a lot of times, especially during COVID, there was a short turnaround with those. So it would be like, we're going to have the bid call, it's in 48 hours. Make sure you're there if you're interested in this. They'd give information during that call saying they were going to share it later. But just because of the kind of emergency response timeline for COVID and needing to get that money out, a lot of times they weren't able to share some of like the Q&A right away. So it was important to be at that bid call in order to hear what they had to say and ask questions. And I would say that there were probably other calls that were like that for the a lot of the COVID response, like for NIH with some of their other transaction authority announcements that came out. We had calls like that as well, where you had to be on the call. If you weren't on the call, you weren't going to get the follow-up emails. So that is something, that's a good point and something to watch out for. With other funding announcements, thinking about foundations and that kind of thing, a lot of times they will have I think they usually call it like a technical assistance webinar or something like that for applicants. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is one that comes to mind in particular. So they usually have one, and they will have a panel there of folks that are involved in creating the funding opportunity. They'll give a presentation, and then they usually have some time for Q&A, and you can join those. A lot of times, sometimes you can see who's joining them, sometimes you can't. But those are good opportunities to ask questions when they do have that space for Q&A. I find that the Q&A is more, because the funding announcement is going to tell me, I can read that, but the Q&A I find is more helpful sometimes than the funding announcement itself. Does that kind of answer your question? Okay. All right, so I think we'll move on to the nonprofit and foundation funding and corporate giving. And Maggie, if you could share that slide quickly for us.
Here we go.
I have everyone's face up, so let me just move that to the side. So this is another kind of big bucket of funding here. And I've tried to delineate some of the different types of non-federal funders. So the first type there is public charities or voluntary health agencies. A couple examples are American Cancer Society, American Heart Association, United Way. Then you have independent foundations. So these are a lot of times are family foundations. Bloomberg Family Foundation, Rose Welcome Fund, MacArthur Foundation, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Then you have corporate foundations and corporate giving. So Ford Foundation is an example there. That's a foundation set up that is tied to the Ford company, but the foundation operates separately. Blue Cross Blue Shield is another example I have listed there, and I believe I have them listed under the corporate giving category. So they actually will do sponsorships that are not out of their foundation funding. Instead, they're just direct sponsorships from their company. Then you have individual philanthropists. So that is just donors that donate privately. You have community foundations, so Chicago Community Trust. And they usually fund within a specific geographic area. And then university is another bucket that I have here. So like I mentioned, there are some universities that offer direct grant funding. So I did put one example of an opportunity there. I think that deadline for that is coming up too. And then you could also partner with the university to receive funding that's coming from another source. So it could be funding from another one of these sources on this page, or it could be funding from a government partner. All right, Maggie, next slide. So where to search for non-federal funding. So one way to search is through grant search engines. And I've listed a few here. So the first one seems like it's pretty popular, Foundation Directory Online. It is a paid service. Most of the grant search engines are paid services. There is free access at some libraries, and through that Forefront organization, there are some limited search options. So there is a website that is listed later in the slides where you can go to find out where is a network location that you can use the Foundation Directory Online for free if you need to access it for free. GrantWatch is another paid service. You can go to the GrantWatch website just to see what types of search results come up, but they will make you pay to see, the full search result. Grant Gopher has a free light account. It's not as flashy as the other sites, but they do offer that free light account, and then they have some paid versions of the account as well. I listed Pivot there, so that's one that our university uses. It has a research focus. I will show that to you just so you have an example of what one of these non-federal searches looks like. Nonprofit and foundation websites are a good place to find funding opportunities. So what I would recommend doing is, after you've kind of done your research or your prospecting on which nonprofit or foundations might be a good fit, then maybe make a spreadsheet of those with the link to their website, and then check those on a regular basis and sign up for their listservs. So that's how I get most of the funding opportunities that come to us, is just by encountering them over time, signing up for the listserv, and then eventually they will appear in my inbox on a regular basis. The link there, Philanthropy News Digest, that is a free site, and a lot of foundations will post there. And you can search that. I believe it gets posted on somewhat regular basis, either weekly or bi-weekly. And then just doing general web searches and kind of modifying the search so that you are only getting search results for a certain type of organization. So an example there, say you want to look for Illinois Community Health Grants. If you modify that search by putting that site :.org, then that will only give you, sites that are eligible to be a .org, which are usually going to be foundations or nonprofits, and you can narrow your search results that way. And then another example is Community Partner Grant, site.edu. We'll pull up some universities that offer grants to community partners. And then the last search there, Social Responsibility Grants, Chicago Community. That social responsibility is a term that's used by a lot of corporate giving websites. So that one will pull up some of the corporate giving sites. That one's a little bit messier. Any questions about or comments about searching for non-federal funding? I'm sure folks on this call have a lot of experience about this.
There is one question in the chat, Robin. Deborah's asking if you could speak to some of the pros and cons of the different funding sources. It's a great question.
Yeah, it's a good question. So every funding opportunity is unique. They're like snowflakes. And some of them are, you know, the right fit and with the right part funder who will give you the right level of flexibility. And I think that finding the right fit with the right amount of flexibility is kind of the magic recipe. And it's not always one type of funder or another. So in general, foundations tend to be more flexible, but a really good program officer at a federal agency can also help you navigate that process to where a federal grant can also be a really good fit. The federal grants tend to offer more money over more time, whereas the foundation grants tend to offer smaller amounts of money over shorter periods of time. So there's a trade-off there, right? For a federal grant, you might have more reporting requirements and a stricter scope of work to follow, but you might have more stability in funding. Whereas with a foundation grant, you might have a smaller amount of funding, but more flexibility to do what you need or want with that funding. Sometimes it's nice to pair the two. So say in the academic world, a lot of times we will pilot something using foundation funding, and so that we can show feasibility and you know, just kind of develop the idea a little further, and then we can take that and apply for federal funding to scale the program larger. So related to the above question, are some government agencies more transparent or clear about what gets awarded than others, and how important or relevant is relationship building with government agencies? Good question. Yes, some government agencies are more transparent and clear about what gets awarded than others. And I think it comes down to resources. So if you do a little bit of digging on that usaspending.gov by government agency and take a look at some of those charts, you're going to see that NIH has a lot of funding. They have a lot of infrastructure. They can afford to be transparent and build that beautiful site. Other agencies are trying to get by with less. The EPA, for example, has been disinvested in over the last several years. So, you know, it's harder for them to get the same level of information out there. And that's why I made a point of putting some of the agency websites on that slide and didn't just say go to usaspending.gov or just go to grants.gov. Is sometimes the way that they get that out there is specifically by putting it on their website. If they have to prioritize one place where they're going to put it, they're going to put it there rather than in some of the other places. How important or relevant is relationship building with government agencies? I think it can be hard to build relationships with government agencies, but when you have the opportunity to do so, it can be, you know, really helpful. So in our world where we do research, we might have several projects funded through, say, the National Institute for Environmental Health Sciences, and have the same program officer across multiple projects. So when that happens, we start to build a relationship with that program officer, and that makes it easier for us to navigate that funding. It makes it easier for us to reach out when we do need to make a change to the project. It makes it easier for us to reach out if we want to get a little bit more background information about a funding opportunity, like, hey, we saw this come out. Is it something that would be a good fit for us, or did you know, do you think it was a better fit for someone else? That kind of thing. So it can be important, but it's such a big space that I want to acknowledge that it's really difficult. If you have an existing project already, then, you know, that's a nice place to start and build on a relationship there. All right, Maggie, if you can move to the next slide. Okay, so this is just a screenshot of the foundation directory online. This is their quick start function. This is free. So if you go to the website and you sign up for just the quick start account, you can do this. It will give you all of the funders for a search. So I think for this search, I did just the Chicago area, and then you can sort it. So you can see the top funder in the Chicago area is the Chicago Community Trust. This is just something you could use as a tool for learning about the landscape of funding in your area. And you can go to the next slide, Maggie. So to do a full search, though, if you were wanting to get more detail about the funders and what they've been funding, and if they have open funding opportunities, you would need access to the foundation directory online. So as I mentioned, they have a funding information network. You can go to that website there to see what the network sites are. Network sites are locations where you can access the directory online for free. You know, some of your organizations may already have access to foundation directory online or be able to afford an account, but if you can't, you can do the free access. There are several libraries. So I think Oak Park is the closest library where you can access it for free. And Evanston shows up there as well. Chicago Public Libraries were not listed as a site. Within the city of Chicago, Forefront is listed. So Forefront will do, I believe on their website, they said 1 search per week for you, and you contact their librarian directly to do that. Go to the next slide. So Forefront is a membership-based organization, so you do pay to be a member, but they have some resources that are available for free. That link there is to their library, so they have resources on there such as that video I shared with you earlier, as well as how to use the request for the foundation directory online if you are not a member. And they also had a really nice page on policy updates. So if you're interested in some of the local and state federal funding, some of their policy updates is relevant to that as well. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick search on Pivot just to give an example of a grant search engine, even though most of you probably are not going to use this one if you're not involved in research. Give me just a second to pull it up here. And I think I accidentally lost this page when I pulled up those other sites. So I apologize for just taking a second. Okay. All right. So this is what the Pivot search tool looks like. And I'm going to just do a keyword search to start. One of those keywords that Maggie shared earlier. We'll do overdose prevention. And we got 1,382 results. And I can take a look here by a lot of different categories. So if I've been searching grants.gov already, I don't care so much about federal government opportunities. I'm going to look for private foundation or nonprofit opportunities. Now I've got 485 results. And I am looking for nonprofit opportunities. It's going to narrow it down to 182 results. And this search is, it's a global search tool, so I'm going to narrow it down to those in US dollars. And then I have 151 results. And I would probably just go through that. You could narrow it down further with some other filters. But what I find is sometimes some too many things get filtered out, right? So I would probably just go through that. Some of these are not named in a specific way, so you just have to click through and then read a little bit more, see if it's a good fit. And one thing to look for on these is eligibility, because a lot of these opportunities are going to be tied to a geographic area. This specific one says the awards program is open to all individuals, programs, and organizations within the US. Members of neither the foundation or their relatives are eligible for recognition. So seems like you would be eligible if you were in the city of Chicago, but then we want to read about the funding opportunity and see, you know, what it is exactly. And this will take us to the website. And this is actually an award here. One thing that's nice about some of these services, and this is why they can be a useful tool, is not just for that kind of quick search, but more so for building some of these advanced searches. So for example, let's say I'm going to build a social determinants search. For projects in the United States. We'll go commercial, private, academic institution, state or local government, private foundation or nonprofit. So I'm just avoiding federal opportunities. This tool has some options to exclude. I'm going to skip that for now because it's a long list. I'm going to hit search. I got 32 results. So that's a pretty nice limited search. So what I can do is I can save this search and then have it email me on a regular basis. And I think that that is part of the key of searching for grants, is just setting up as many automatic kind of searches and things that come straight to you, because, you know, things get in the way of you going to these places, or you forget where you need to go. So if they just come to your email and cross your path, and it just happens to be that right moment when you have a project that is a good match, then that is always the best kind of opportunity. Maggie, what is the next slide?
We're going to talk about finding the right fit and whether to apply.
Okay, perfect. You can go ahead and pull those up. Now, this is just a nice list of questions here that I came across as you're looking for grant funding. Eligibility is one of the biggies to get out of the way first. Then these other ones are getting into fit, so that you're not forcing your programmatic agenda into a funder's agenda. So do I have, or can I conceive of a project that fits the parameters? Does my project align with the goals and priorities of the funder and stated purpose of the solicitation? Can I address all of the required elements, or bring in partners who can fill blanks? Here's a good one, kind of thinking about our article, is do I have the bandwidth to develop a proposal under the deadline and implement the project? Would I be excited to execute the grant, and might the grant serve as a stepping stone to bigger, better grants in the future? Okay, and then I've talked here already about tracking opportunities and thinking about the long game. So sign up for those listservs and newsletters, and I've listed a few there. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is really good at getting their opportunities out there. NIH puts out a weekly funding announcement list. Grant Station Insider. Grant Station is a paid service, but their newsletter is free if you want to receive that. And then save those custom and automated searches from the search engines. If you know that, say, certain foundations or nonprofit funders release funding on at certain times of year, so a lot of times it's around their board meetings, save calendar reminders for yourself to go and check their website and see if a new posting is out there. All right, so that's it. And we can take this time to answer questions or for people to share their experiences searching for grants.
There is one question queued up in the chat. Edgar's asking if you could talk about characteristics that an agency should have in order to apply for grant funding and sustain their work.
Characteristics. Well, capacity is, I think, you know, we talked about that at the beginning, is that applying for grant funding is not easy. So you need to have the capacity to apply for the funding in the first place, the capacity to execute the work, and then a lot of times funders are going to ask you about sustainability. So what kind of capacity do you have to sustain the work, to whether that's to usually that's to look for other funding to build on it. So and that's a hard one because everyone has challenges with capacity right now. I mean, we even have challenges with capacity, right? And the bigger you get, the more capacity you need. So it's a toughie, but I think that that gets to feasibility. So is what you propose to do feasible for you? And can you communicate to the funder, whether that's not a non-federal or federal funder, that you have the capacity and the work you're proposing to do is feasible? If you're applying for federal funding, there are some requirements that you do need to have in place. So you will need a SAM registration and a UEI, a unique entity identifier. So that's a number that you have to get from the federal government in order to apply. You need to set up a grants.gov account for your organization. And those kinds of things, which are usually outlined in the funding opportunity. Yeah, does anyone from the group have thoughts on how organizations with limited capacity can obtain grant funding from their experience? And Vicky says, the way I've seen is working an insane amount of hours. I think grant funding comes with that a lot. Brandon, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I know that one thing that we do at Urban Growers Collective, because there's just so many grant opportunities out there, and like everybody can create a spreadsheet of all the ones that we're eligible for. But I think that what's really helpful in the way that we have been managing our resource development is having and working on building solid programs and partnerships with other organizations first, and then letting the different grant opportunities that are coming through, whether that's federal programs, foundation, or all these other different types of grants, to support those active themselves. And I think that that's been really helpful, just in terms of like from a development perspective, of not having to constantly be worried about grant deadlines when they're going to be running out and whether we'll have staff positions that can continue. But also just in terms of like the quality of work, and with what I heard from the discussion with the reading earlier, not needing to feel like we're always in these episodic, relationships of chasing funding, especially if we're working with partners or if a lot of us, and I think within public health in particular, thinking about those long-term health outcomes for the populations that we're serving within the programs themselves. Also thinking about creating sustainability that's based on the actual work rather than the money that's coming through funding sources.
Yeah, that's a good comment, and a challenge too. Obviously, you have to have some capacity to do that as well. But I think one of the things that I'm hearing is that you're taking a lot of you're not being reactionary, and you're taking a lot of time to really think about what applications are going in the program that's being funded. And I think that is what makes a successful proposal a lot of times. So when you are too reactionary, if you're just going after every grant and you're too reactionary, a lot of times you don't have the time to really make it something or craft something that a funder is going to be interested in funding, right? So it's kind of like prioritizing your efforts, and something that has a really short deadline just may not be a good fit for you. You might have to pass, right? So you might have to keep an eye out for something that you know is going to come up again in the future, and think about that, potential deadline 6 months from now. If this comes up in the future again, this is the funding opportunity that was a really good fit, and how can we prepare for that when it does come out, instead of staying up all night when it comes out. Which is easier said than done.
Robin, I have a question. I know that within like climate justice and infrastructure, on the federal level, there's been the Justice 40 initiative where there's a hope to include more equitable funding for underserved and BIPOC organizations and communities. I'm wondering if within public health and in the funding landscape there, if there's anything similar for public health, and also even within non-federal grants, if there are things that we should consider also when we're looking about like health equity to in our grant prospecting, if that can help to narrow down the search at all or point us towards more relevant germane grants.
Mm-hmm. So the NIH just released a new climate change initiative. They have a website. They just posted a couple of funding announcements in that area. So one is called a notice of a special interest. And what that means is that they say across multiple institutes and centers that they're interested in funding work related to climate change and human health. I haven't looked at which institutes or centers specifically subscribe to that, but one of the institutes and centers that's part of NIH is the National Institute for Minority Health Disparities. So I would expect if they subscribe to that NOCI that they're going to be particularly interested in climate justice and health disparities related to climate change. So that's just one example in the public health space of a major kind of influx of funding in that area. There's also the Office of Minority Health has put out some announcements, since the pandemic related to just health disparities and health justice in general. We may see something come out from them. I don't know, but that would just be another place to keep an eye on it. And again, with the federal agency signing up for their listservs, so that you'll be kind of one of the first ones to get that information when it comes out.
Thank you.
Also, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation would be another one to keep an eye on as well.
This might be a good place to wrap up with this thinking about equity and structural change. as we thread that through these next few conversations we'll be having. We just have a couple minutes left. So I want to thank Robin for being here and for answering our questions. Every time I hear you talk, I learn so much from you. And I want to thank all of you for being here and being engaged. All of your questions are great questions. Next week, we'll have another chance to do nothing but ask questions. So with that, I want to just wrap us up on the next steps and then let folks go for the day. So for today, good news, no writing assignment for this week. We do ask though, if you haven't done the pre-assessment, please do it in the next few days. Let us know why you're here, what you want to learn, so we can try to get some of your questions answered. And then if you have some time, explore the funding websites that Robin shared. I know there were a lot of resources, so we're going to post the links, the recording, and the PowerPoints after today and let you know when they're up. Heads up for next week, we have a panel on what makes a successful grant proposal. So we're going to have people from foundations, state and federal funding, and we're going to be welcoming back Robin to talk about subcontracts. So that's what is ahead of us. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for your questions, and we're really excited to work with you over the next few weeks. So with that, take care everyone. We'll see you next week, and we'll be sending out an email with all the information soon. Bye folks.